Good evening, everyone. You're listening to Red Pill 78. I am the Corruption Detector, and I want to thank you once again for joining us. We have a very, very special interview tonight. I'm super excited about it. It's my friend Nate Cain. Nate is someone who's been in the news as of late. He is a veteran. He is a government employee or has been an employee in the intelligence community. And most notably, he was the man that was identified as the Clinton Foundation whistleblower. Now, I just want to say that up front because we're not going to be talking about that tonight. It's something that we're going to have to save for a different time. But we are going to talk about Nate. We're going to talk about his life, things that have been going on, and some things that are very special to him and a project that he's working on right now. So, Nate, I just want to thank you for joining us. And go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience.
Hey, thank you so much for having me, and I really appreciate your show. I love watching it, and so excited to be here tonight. I just to talk to you guys to let you know. I reached out to Red Pill 78, and talked to him about coming on tonight. We're in the midst of something really special, and of course, you guys are all very familiar with the deep state and the problems that are going on right now in our government and our country. And each of us is in a different place in our lives, and have various things that we are responsible for and have a duty to. In my case, it was a duty to blow the whistle on some pretty serious stuff. In Red Pill's case, he's got a YouTube channel, and he's getting the word out there in that way. And others of you have various circles of influence and people that that you can influence and to get out there and vote when voting time comes around, or to get out there and inform your fellow coworkers and friends about the truth. So many of you who have followed me on Twitter, I believe, have learned a little bit about myself in terms of my faith, and I am a Christian, and I'm a firm believer that while we do have a responsibility to do certain things in the physical world and things that we have a duty to do, and just in terms of being good citizens and having integrity, the other thing is that there's a spiritual war going on right now, and this is not entirely a physical thing. And if we think that we can solve these problems purely off of our own strength, we're badly fooled. So one of the things that has come to my mind is this really a strong need to pray. I was actually inspired by another Twitter person that I followed who started Operation Bended Knee. And I'm not exactly sure who was the one that started that to begin with, but one of the things that's really great about it is we started doing this thing where we were praying on Wednesdays at 1:11 every Wednesday, and we would stop and take 10 minutes to pray. But my sister-in-law, Gracie West, she's also known as Embarrassing Mom. She has her own YouTube channel, and she ended up posting out there that she wanted to start a 15 days of prayer and fasting. And she put that out, and I got all excited about it because I was definitely feeling the need to do some fasting praying. And I posted it out there, and it got quite a great reception from a lot of people that they wanted to join in. And I realized that we had the makings of something here, a movement that can really have a major impact, on the spiritual side of things. So I don't know, again, for those of you that don't follow me on Twitter, you might not know this, but the last 2 weeks have been a living hell for me. I've had six ER visits with family members. We have had our house basement, which is fully finished, flooded. We've had one car that broke down, and another car in the family that was wrecked in a car accident. And it has just been absolutely crazy. And all of this has happened within the last 10 days. And I really have the sense that there is a spiritual battle going on The demonic forces are out in full right now, and they are doing what they can to try to disrupt and to try to dampen our spirits. And so I'm a firm believer, though, in prayer, and I've seen God do amazing things. The Bible talks about prayer, and it talks about fasting. And the way I look at fasting is it's kind of like a supercharge to your prayers. Jesus talked about it in Matthew, where there were some of his disciples were trying to cast a demon out of somebody, and they were having trouble, and it wasn't happening. And they came to him and they said, why can't we cast this demon out? He said, some demons only come out through prayer and fasting. And I thought that was interesting. One of the things that a lot of believers, Christian believers, believe in is that there are powerful spiritual entities that have territorial rights to be in certain places. In America, this would be over certain cities, or maybe over a certain type of situation, and they have power. And it's not easy for them to be removed. And there was this when I first found out about Q. Okay, I wasn't really too knowledgeable about the movement or anything like that. And working in the intelligence community, I kind of stayed away from the 8chan forums, and I didn't want to accidentally come across anything that I shouldn't. And so the first time really that I heard about it was from another Twitter follower, and somebody that I was following, and I saw they were mentioning about it, but I really didn't know anything about how to get to any of these forums or anything like that. But what I started seeing was a lot of people were posting at the end of their message. At the end of their messages, they were posting QAnon and things like that. But one of the things that caught my attention was they were posting Great Awakening. And that caught my attention. And I remember the first time I saw that, I kept thinking, what, Great Awakening, Great Awakening? Where have I heard that before? Why does that ring a bell? And the reason it rung a bell was I had read stories about a great revival that had taken place in England before about 50 years, roughly, before the Revolutionary War in England. And it moved across to the United States, or to America at the time, the colonies. And it really had just this massive spiritual awakening, caused a spiritual awakening in America. And what was amazing was this spiritual awakening really kind of got people to think new ideas about religion, and about the idea of being able to have freedom of religion. And those types of discussions came as a result of this Great Awakening. Ultimately, it led to ideas of freedom and independence, and led to the Revolutionary War. So you had this massive Great Awakening, and people getting saved, and people becoming Christians. And then the next thing that you see is this massive war and this massive loss of life. The next Great Awakening that happened in America happened right before, about 50 years or so before the Civil War. And Charles Finney, the first one was really led by Jonathan Edwards, but the second one prior to the Civil War was Charles Finney. He was an abolitionist, and he really, had a interesting style of preaching. He was one really that kind of was the first one to bring up the idea of the altar call and that sort of thing. But another Great Awakening occurred, and this massive revival spread across the United States, and it was a very exciting time in America. And because of a lot of the people who were leading this Great Awakening were in fact involved in the abolition movement, and were opposed to slavery. It began to open up the dialogue amongst America about the issue of slavery. And about 50 years later, of course, we had the Civil War. Again, this massive loss of life, but also the abolition of slavery. And So there's been other revivals, large revivals. In fact, there was a Azusa Street revival that occurred. Um, and there were some other revivals that have occurred, in various places. But the Great Awakenings were things that affected the entire country, that affected, in some cases, more than just the United States, affected Europe as well. And there have been a lot of people that have been talking about and have had prophetic words and things about another Great Awakening coming. And I do believe that there is another one coming. I'm very excited about it. I think that we'll see it in our lifetimes. And I think it's going to affect not only the United States, but other countries as well. So, I don't know what's going to happen in terms of what the major issue is going to be that we become enlightened to. I don't know, if some major disaster is going to follow, 50 years later, like in the past ones. But there is a sense that some major cultural shift is going to occur as a result of it, because that's what's happened, the last few times that these things have happened. And one of the things that all of these major revivals and great awakenings have had in common is that they all were preceded by lots and lots of prayer. People committing themselves to praying, to fasting, and calling upon God, to bring about this revival and to awaken the hearts, of their fellow citizens to their need for God. And so I'm very excited about this. The goal is to do this thing for 15 days. We started today, so it'll go till May 15th, and then we'll take a 2-month break, kind of collect our thoughts, just so we don't get burned down on it, and we'll start again. And then we'll take a 2-month break, and then we'll start again, and we'll keep doing this until we see results. And the idea is we've come up with a list of some things to pray for. All of this can be found on the website www.bendedkneearmy.com. And there's a list that's posted on there. There's a forums on there where people can go and they can put up prayer requests. There's, like I said, the list of 15 different items that we're kind of focused in on for each of these days. And the fasting part of it is we're not recommending that people go and, starve themselves. Okay. Everybody's in a different place. Some people have, medical issues. They can't fast food. Others can't, fast for various lengths of, they can only fast for short lengths of time. But it's up to you, and it's between you and God. For me, what I'm fasting is I'm getting rid of news and my, no offense, Red Pill, but I won't be watching your show for the next 15 days.
No problem.
because for me, one of the things that takes up the most time for me is I have a 2-hour commute each way going into work and going home. And during that time, I usually listen to podcasts, or I'll listen to various YouTube channels and or the news, and I'll kind of catch myself up, and it keeps me pumped, keeps me thinking. It's very interesting, especially in light of the things that I've been involved in, kind of staying abreast of all of this. So for example, today I know that Bill Barr was talking, was had a hearing on Capitol Hill, and I wanted so badly to watch it, but
it was epic.
And so I knew it would be, because he's awesome. I love watching how he just manhandles the Congress, but he goes there. He really doesn't, or the press is even better. He really just doesn't give a crap. He what he believes is the right thing to do. But I really wanted to watch it, and I walked into the food court, near my work, and every TV had it on. So I just kind of had to look down the whole time and just eat my sandwich, and but I know that that moment when I felt that compulsion to want to watch it, instead what I did was I just kind of bowed my head and I prayed. And I prayed about the things that that God has put on my heart. The item that we started with today was praying for worldwide revival. or praying for the Great Awakening to occur. Tomorrow there'll be a new item. I think tomorrow is praying for religious people who are being religiously persecuted. And so, each day has a focus item, but I'm also praying about a lot of other things. As you know, I mentioned I've been feeling like I'm under a lot of spiritual attack. So, of course, I'm praying about that.
No, Nate, real quick, when
Sure.
we had spoken earlier, it's been really heavy for the last 10 days, but it's been going on for longer than that. I
Oh
mean,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. I
it's
mean,
been almost a constant barrage.
well. So if you think about it, really, we're going on 2 years. No, shoot. So I made my disclosure in towards the end of 2017.
Okay, so
Okay.
like October or
Um, I think it was like November,
November.
November,
Okay,
and yeah, and then yeah. So anyways, without getting too much into any detail about that, it was it's been a long time
yeah,
that I'm dealing with this, and at first, the issue was about trying to maintain my anonymity, trying to navigate, these scary waters of, how do you report on essentially the people who are in charge, you
right.
know?
And your employer,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, and so so I had to make some plans, and and I had a very good lawyer, who helped me to get through the Whistleblowing Protection Act process. And it was not something that just happened overnight. It's something that took preparation, took planning, took making arrangements, getting agreements, from the Inspector General and all of that. I mean, there was a lot of work that went into it and agreements that I could maintain my anonymity, and use a code name and all this kind of stuff. But I knew that at some point in time, it was possible that I would be found out who I was, and certainly it looks like that's what occurred because eventually my home got raided and all of my electronics confiscated, and currently I'm still under investigation. So for those of you that are asking yourselves why doesn't he say anything, why doesn't he talk about it, for one, my intent has never been to talk about the actual data that I handed over, because it was this was data that is not authorized for public consumption
mm-hmm.
without going through redactions and things like that. And it would be illegal for me to do that. So that's why I went through the Inspector General, and made that disclosure the right way. And then eventually, through him to both the intelligence committees. But the yeah, this process has been it's been a very emotionally draining process. I left my job at the FBI after I made my disclosure because, quite frankly, I didn't feel safe there.
Yeah,
And I didn't want to have to deal with constantly always worrying and having to look over my shoulder. So I got another job, and I was working at that job for about a year, and I loved it. It was a great job working as a contractor for the VA. And when this whole thing happened, I was working from home 100%. So my work computer, my contracting computer, all of that was at my house. And when the FBI raided my house, they confiscated all of that. So it kind of forced me to out myself to my employer. And through, unfortunate circumstances, eventually they let me go. And, so I was out, looking for another job. And eventually I found another job, which I have now. And things are back to, getting back to normal, at least in terms of income. But for a while there, I really was, every day was me on my knees praying and asking God, where my next, income was going to come from, and praying about, different, fears and worries. And I'm a human being, and a lot of people look at me and they see me as this, this person who, has all this faith and courage and all of that. And I want to say something. I am no more a hero than anybody else out there. I'm just a guy. I'm a guy who's a sinner, just like the rest of everybody else. Who I have my own problems, my own issues that I got to deal with, my own fears and things that I have to overcome. And I will say that this whole experience has definitely grown my faith more than anything else I've ever experienced in my life, because every day I've had to depend on God 100%. Um, to give you an example of some of the miraculous things that God has done, when this first thing, when I first had to expose myself to my company, I didn't have computers to work anymore, and so they put me on administrative leave without pay, and so I had to use up my leave time and my vacation time and my sick leave, and even went into the hole. And what ended up, happening was when I was starting to come towards the end of that, um, I was really beginning to freak out. I was like, oh man,
It's understandable.
because I'm like, I'm going to run out here, and they're not going to have any choice but to let me go. And then um, my lawyer got a call from a reporter at the Daily Caller, Richard Pollock, and so they approached him and asked him, if he wanted to, basically share our side of the story, and so he could get a scoop, before whoever this other um, uh, media outlet was. And so my lawyer, very reluctantly, because he has, avoided the media pretty much his entire career, but he felt, in this case, because of what was happening to me, that he would make that exception. And so he called me up and asked me if I was willing to allow him to talk to the media. And I told him, yeah. And it was very scary. I mean, you talk about being afraid. For those of you that don't understand, when I was, so I joined the military in 1998 and have had a clearance since then.
Oh, wow.
Sorry, actually before that, 1998 was when I got my first duty station. So actually I went through training and all of that, but my clearance, takes about a year to get it. And so I've had a clearance since then. And I've spent the majority of my career trying to minimize my footprint on the internet, very tight social media. I didn't have a Twitter account. I didn't have, anything really other than a Facebook account, which was locked down like you wouldn't believe, and only my family members and very close friends had access to it. And I spent my time, really trying to avoid, a presence on the internet. Every once in a while I'd Google myself and make sure that nothing was out there about me. After this whole story broke, I went from having like 2 followers on Twitter, to having like 24,000. And that was largely in part because Q dropped my name in the story, on the Q forums. And, so I'm sitting there and all of a sudden I log into my Twitter and I see, 10,000, 12,000, 14,000. And it's like growing like every minute. And everybody's, typing the same thing. Q sent me, Q sent me. I'm like, what the hell is going on here?
No, wait, before you go on, had you heard about Q prior to your whistleblower status?
Yeah, so I had heard about it, but I honestly had not really looked into it. And I was kind of like, you got to understand. So when you work for the FBI, there's a lot of stuff that you see out there on the internet, and people assume things, and they have their conspiracy theories. But when you work for an agency, you actually see the real deal, what's going on. And so, and this is, the truth is, there's a lot of misinformation out there, a lot.
Sure.
On the internet. A lot of assumptions are made. I kind of follow the idea of Occam's razor. Usually the simplest answer is the right answer. But when people can't explain things, they want answers. And so oftentimes, they will make stuff up, or they will assumptions. And so I was very skeptical of the whole Q thing. And, and so that's, why I wasn't never really on those forums and all that. I kind of looked at it a couple of times, but, I left it alone. But Yeah, so I really, when I started seeing all these people coming on my Twitter, I didn't know what to think. And but what I found was that everybody was so supportive, just telling me they were praying for me, telling me that thanking me for what I did. Um, and the encouragement I got from that honestly was a huge blessing and a real big reason why I was able to maintain my sanity, in the last, over the last year,
That's awesome. You
over
made
the
a
last several months.
point earlier that I wanted to call back to with that. The Great Awakening. I from what I've seen, from what I believe, this Great Awakening has also been about knowledge and faith. I mean, people had
Hmm.
Christianity, having a relationship with God. The whole idea about it had really been marginalized and crushed.
Yeah,
You're a weirdo if you believe in God, or you're a
right.
weirdo, if you've been saved, and so but you can be a witch and cast spells on the president,
Right,
you know,
right, and that's
and it's
perfectly acceptable.
yeah, totally go for it, and so. I believe that we're already in it, only now, this Great Awakening is about freeing ourselves from this like society of slavery that we were tricked into, and
Yeah,
just sleptwalked our way through. We without getting conspiratorial. I mean, we have masters in the world. I mean, like, we are run by business and banking.
there is
And yeah.
no doubt in my mind that there definitely is a cabal,
Mm-hmm.
that is, has major power and influence. I mean, if anybody doubted that, all they got to do is look at this, Russian collusion, hoax that's been going on for the last 2 years, and look at all the players who were involved
Mm-hmm.
at the highest levels. And I don't, again, I don't want to get too much into that and talk
No.
about too much, but it's pretty clear, that there were people, who are abusing power, and and I think that's the next thing I think that's going to be coming out, and I'm praying and I'm asking the Lord to, reveal the truth and to bring about justice and to restore, our Justice Department. We need the FBI. We need the Justice Department. They do very, very important work. There are a lot of bad actors in our country.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of terrorist groups, homegrown extremist groups, and the FBI plays a very valuable role in helping to prevent these guys from mass murder. I mean,
Yeah.
if the average American knew the stuff that the FBI has prevented from happening over the last few years, they would be shocked.
I'm
And
sure.
and there's a scene in Men in Black,
Mm-hmm.
uh, where he realizes that there's aliens, and Tommy Lee Jones is sitting down with him. He's like, if and Will Smith says to him, he says, well, why don't they just tell everybody the truth, and they can handle it. And he goes, are you kidding me? And he says, the only reason you get up every day and you can go to work and you can go home at night and sleep is because you don't know what's out there. And the truth is that uh, when it comes to the types of dangers and threats that there are against our nation and against our safety, the only reason that people can go to bed at night and not be anxious and worrying about these things is because, quite frankly, most of the time they don't know about it, because the FBI does a damn good job of stopping it. And so I have respect, regardless of what happened to me, and regardless of how of my feelings about uh, about myself being wronged as a whistleblower. Um, I have respect for the FBI. I have respect for the DOJ. They have a purpose, but just like any other government entity, they do need to be held accountable. There does need to be more transparency. The Whistleblower Protection Act needs some fixes made to it, and you know, holy, holy moly, man, the FISA,
Oh yeah.
uh, that whole thing needs to be completely looked at, gone through with a fine tooth comb, needs to be fixed, because obviously there's been some abuses of it. And So I mean, these are things that I think most Americans see and understand. Unless they are a person who is not a reasoned person. Okay, they're going to see this and they're going to agree with that. I mean, that's beneficial to you no matter what your political views are, no matter where you stand, on the left or the right. Everybody should want a system that's fair, that's not two-tiered, that's not one where if you're a politically connected, powerful person, you get off, but if you're just some average Joe, you get the book thrown at you.
Yeah.
Everybody should want fairness, and justice really is supposed to be blind. And so that's how I feel about it. I feel like, that I'm hoping and that Bill Barr will help to be able to fix some of these things, that guys like Lindsey Graham and Chuck Grassley will be able to fix some of these things, in the legislature. These things do need to be fixed without any doubt. But there is a importance, like even the CIA. I know a lot of people don't like the CIA, but the fact is that the CIA, they protect us overseas.
Yeah.
They are watching out for all kinds of things, that the enemy wants to do to us. NSA, a lot of people are concerned about the powers that the NSA has to listen, and there's definitely a place for debate about those things, and it needs to occur. And there certainly needs to be more transparency and more accountability. A perfect example of that is some of the FOIA requests that have, exposed, some of the abuses of these tools. Clearly, these things need to be fixed, but we are in a place. We have to remember that, number one, we have a representative government. And if these guys aren't protecting us, if they're not doing their job to make sure that there's accountability in these agencies, then it's time for us to elect new people who will.
Well, yeah, I mean, I completely agree with you there, but I think that part of the problem is, as long as I can remember, it never seemed to me that our representative government was representing anything other than their own interests and the interests of their, close business associates,
Sure.
So, I mean, draining the swamp is huge, I mean,
it is. It's a real problem.
We had talked before, and I said, I had just checked out at a certain point because I didn't think it was possible. I thought that America was too far gone, and I know that there's good men and women in, in the intelligence community, in the military, and even in, elected government, my background's in administrative government, so there is, I understand all of that, but it's like it's like a complicated scheme, it is. It's a racket,
it is. And I mean, like
crime.
even like with the politicians, let's face it, they need money to get elected. And so, they meet with lobbyists, they take campaign money from different industries and things like that. And in many cases, they probably feel beholden to them. There are some major problems, that have to be addressed. But that aside, coming back full circle back to what the Bended Knee Army is all about, is the Bended Knee Army recognizes that this is more than just a physical battle. It's more than just passing good legislation, more than just voting for people and voting out bad people. It's more than just asking for transparency and holding people accountable. We need God's help in this. It is such a huge monster that has to be tackled. That there's no way possible that I believe there's no way possible that we can accomplish this without God's help.
Oh, yeah, I would completely agree with you on that.
So we have to be praying about it. We do need to be lifting up, our representatives, our president, our judges in prayer. And so, there will be like on I think day 4, 5, and 6 is like the executive branch and the president, the Congress, the legislative branch, and the judiciary. There's been so much evidence. They're political activists, and they really are not judging on the basis of the intent of the law. They're basing it off of, their political, views.
Mm-hmm.
That is unacceptable in a constitutional republic. So these are things yes, there are things that we should do in terms of raising our voice, about these things and debating these issues, but that's only going to do so much. We need supernatural help to expose wrongdoing where it exists, where people are very good at hiding it. We need supernatural help to encourage the right people to run for office, or to supernatural help to motivate people like the president to nominate the right judges, and for the right judges to get appointed, for legislature and for the right people to get elected. And we have a responsibility as believers to pray for our government. Even those that I don't really care for,
Mm-hmm.
I pray for, and and I ask for God to. I usually say, God, change their hearts and help them to be, righteous in their decisions. But if they're not going to, then get them out of there.
Well, it's important, Nate, because people ask me all the time, what can I do, or I wish I could do something, and not everybody can have a YouTube channel. Not everybody can be a whistleblower. Not everybody can be in a position to, work directly with the president. But this is a very small thing, I mean, like in terms of what the time that it takes in your life, for you to set aside 10 minutes, or for you to
Right.
decide something, to set aside so that you can focus your energy and, speaking directly with God and asking for these various things. This is very powerful, and we were talking about this the other day, the collective power of all these people coming together, I think that we've shown what that can do right now. Just all of these people talking about one thing, an idea, just a desire to see our government return to something more balanced and fair, to get these corrupt people out of office and out of government, to see Donald Trump put into office, and to know that there are other people out there like them, whereas previously maybe they felt like they were marginalized and they were all alone. You
Right.
can band together, and with that spiritual energy is very important, because we've got, like I said about the witches, we've got people who have absolutely no problem expending massive amounts of spiritual energy and focusing
Yeah.
it in negative ways, so,
Yep.
and that works, so it will work if we do it in a positive way.
Yeah. And I'm not dogmatic. This bended knee army thing is it is an ecumenical, thing. All right. It's not restricted to evangelical Christians
Mm-hmm.
or Catholics.
Non-denominational.
It is non-denominational.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm looking to encourage people, and even people who aren't sure where they're at with their faith. I'll tell you what, that's how I found God. I found God. I didn't grow up raised in the church. I didn't grow up with Christian parents. What led me to Christ was I basically asked God. I said, I don't know if you exist. I don't know if you're there, but if you are, reveal yourself to me. And through a certain set of events, he did. I started going to this youth group down the road from me because they had hot girls there.
I've heard that before.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, I'm gonna hook up with one of these church girls. And what ended up happening was, instead, God used that as a lure to get me there.
If it works.
Hey, right? What happened was, this guy came and he spoke about the Holy Spirit. And prior to that, I had kind of messed around with the occult and things like that, because I think deep down inside, a lot of people are searching for something that gives them some evidence of an afterlife.
Oh,
They
yeah.
know that there's something greater than ourselves, that when we die, we don't just become, worm food.
Yep.
That that we go on. And I think it's innate in all of us that there's this need to believe that there is something more than us.
Well,
And
we are spiritual beings, and I mean, I think,
absolutely,
it's absolutely innate within us, and I think that we know it. And if we don't have something to focus that on, or, a way to develop it, or, an understanding, then
yeah,
it's natural. People are going to go to whatever it is. And if somebody's
right,
standing there with a, whatever it might be, I mean, a book by Anton LaVey or something like that. Hey,
yeah,
I
yeah.
know the way, and let me show you, people are looking for that, so
Yeah,
very important.
people they're looking for something. They're looking for power. They're looking for some sort of advantage in their life. I mean, that's why people read, their horoscopes. You know, the biggest, these supermarket horoscopes, the biggest joke. But
Yep.
people read them because they want some advantage in their life.
Yep.
People get involved in the occult because they want to know that there's something more. And unfortunately, for the last 100 years, the church has been, in many cases, has been quite dead in terms of the power of the Holy Spirit.
Hmm.
And so I was going to this church that was really um, not very exciting. They didn't even stand up and clap during worship, or get into it. It was just very frozen chosen, kind of a mentality.
Sure.
And but I went to this youth group night, and this guy came and he talked about the Holy Spirit, and he talked about the power of the Holy Spirit. And I knew by the end of that night, I knew that what he was talking about, I wanted, and I did not want to leave there without it. And some really kind of interesting things happen. I mean, here I am at this place trying to impress all these girls, and as this guy's talking, I start feeling this like pounding, in my chest, and this just emotion came over me. I just started weeping. I could not control myself, even as embarrassing as it was. And then the guy sitting on my right, who's a football player and kind of tough guy, he starts weeping. And then the guy on my left, who was he's one of my dear friends now, but he was like really popular with the girls and everything. He starts weeping, and it was like this presence of God, came down and revealed itself to me. And so I ended up telling the guy I didn't want to leave that night without the Holy Spirit. So he ended up praying for me that night to receive the Holy Spirit, and it changed me. I was not the same after that ever. I've had my ups and downs, like every Christian. I've had moments where I don't want to say turned my back on God, but more or less where I kind of ignored God.
Hmm.
And when I joined the army, I went through a period of heavy drinking and partying, especially when I was overseas and, away from my family, and away from my support group.
Hmm.
I went through periods of time of really screwing up and making mistakes. But that's the beauty of the Bible. What I love about it is you can read a lot of different texts of other religions. And what you will find is these fantastical stories of, these people who never make any mistakes, who are perfect. And what's amazing about the Bible is you find people like David, who, you know, was this amazing kid who had courage and boldness, and trusted God and faced up against a giant that everybody else was afraid of and killed him. And I love it because it's rated R. The Bible's not no, it's not PG. He takes his sword and cuts the head off of Goliath, right? And then brings it to the king. And and he gets all this fame because of it. And everybody's, saying, oh, Saul's killed his thousands and David's killed his 10,000s. And then Saul, the king, ends up getting very jealous of David, and he goes through all these trials. And then you see David become king, and you see him fall. He commits adultery,
Hmm.
gets Sheba pregnant, sends her husband off into battle, and has the troops pull back so that he gets killed. So essentially, kind of murders him, or has him killed. And and you see this, and I think if any of us did that, we would think God would never forgive us. God would never love us again. We would be so soiled, so ruined. But what you see is you see this example of God's redemptive power. You see David forgiven by God. You see God actually called David a man after his own heart. And you see him be blessed by God and his children and, future generations, so much so that the future Messiah would come from his line. So those stories have given me hope at the times where I've been, made really big mistakes, and where I've, been foolish, or I've turned my back on God, or ignored God, and come back to him. Those stories have been, a way of encouraging me. And so, for those people that are out there who don't know, if you're not sure where you're at with your belief in God, all I can tell you is, what could it hurt? It's like when Donald Trump told the African American community, what the hell do you have to lose? Okay. So I'm gonna say that to you. If you don't know God and you've never experienced God, why don't you pray and just, hey, look up and say, hey, big God in the sky, or whoever you are, reveal yourself to me. What the hell do you have to lose?
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
So I will tell you, I have seen so many miracles in my life. I've posted some of those on Twitter. One of the most amazing ones, and I'll share this story because it's so compelling, and so many people have written to me and told me how much it has meant to them. When I was in the Army, and I mean, we were dirt poor. We were eligible for food stamps, and I was living in Waynesboro, Pennsylvania, this tiny little town, and I was stationed at Site R, which is this underground facility, up in the mountains.
Oh yeah, I've heard of that. Yeah.
Yep. And so I was working there, and no, there is no alien autopsy room there. I get that all the time from people. Oh, you work there? No. And if there was, I wouldn't tell you.
Right. Of course.
I can neither confirm nor deny, right? No. But what happened? What was amazing was, we had just moved there, and we were living off of BAH, which really wasn't enough. And that's the basic housing allowance. It wasn't enough to really cover our rent and our electricity and all of our bills. And I was making so little money that I was eligible for food stamps, but I was too proud to go get them.
Yep.
And so Thanksgiving was coming around, and I had gotten out on my previous paycheck, and I had bought a turkey roaster for my wife, a big old pot to put the turkey in.
Mm-hmm.
And then, but I was horrible at, managing my money. I was horrible at budgeting, and as most people when they're that age are. And I ended up miscalculating. And when Thanksgiving came around, I didn't have enough money for a turkey. My wife. And Thanksgiving was a really important, that was probably more important than Christmas growing up. That was like the time when we got together with all the family. It was, very important. And this was our first time away from all of our family. And so there was a lot of reasons why it was very important to me that we do it right. But I screwed up, and I didn't have enough money for a turkey. And I remember my wife, she asked me for money for turkey, and I had to tell her I didn't have it. And I got, kind of, my eyes welled up a little bit because she must have seen the shame, in my face. And she's an awesome woman. I mean, just, if there's one thing in my life that God gave me that I'm more grateful than anything else aside from salvation, it's her. She has been, my best friend, and has been there through thick and thin. But she looked at me and she said, "Oh, honey, don't worry about it. It's okay." She said, "Look, I've got these chicken thighs, in the freezer. We can make something from this, and, we can make a nice meal, and, don't worry about it." And she opened up the cupboard and she said, "Look, I've got Kool-Aid up here. We can make Kool-Aid." But it was, back in the day when they had the Kool-Aid packets and you had to add sugar.
Yeah. No sugar.
And we had no sugar. And, so right then and there, that I kind of just felt defeated, like, man, I'm so low right now, and she said, this only means that, God's going to do something to provide. And she says, pray with me, and let's ask God to provide for us. And I'm thinking, like, this is like, this is the day of Thanksgiving, right?
Mm-hmm.
and I'm thinking, it's a little late for that. I was like, if we were going to pray for God to provide, we should have started praying like a week ago.
Right.
But, I humored her. So I bowed my head and, listened to her pray and just kind of, yes, amen, And really, I had no faith at all that anything good was going to come out of it. But, she insisted that, God was not bound by time, that he knew that she would be praying, days before, and he could make arrangements and all of that. Right. And so, okay, I guess, or whatever. We got a knock on the door like 5 minutes after she said amen. And I open up the door, and there's this older gentleman standing there who was one of the deacons at a church that we had visited like a couple of weeks before, because we were checking out different churches to try to find one. And we had checked out this church, and we had been checking out some other churches. But when we went there, I didn't tell anybody about our financial situation. I was way too proud for that. But somebody decided that every Thanksgiving they would give out meals to different families in the church that they felt were needy, and they decided that to give us a meal. And so he's standing there with this 25-pound turkey and 2 grocery bags with everything needed for a massive Thanksgiving feast. And he gave us the stuff, and then he said, I have to go. I got more deliveries to make. And so he ended up leaving. And my wife opened up the first bag, and sitting right on top was a 5-pound bag of sugar.
Oh, wow.
And I just broke into tears, man. I was like a total baby, just crying. And, and just seeing God provide in such a miraculous way. And, my wife, she didn't cry. She just said, she pulled a "I told you so" moment.
She was floating.
God would provide, right. But I was sitting there, and I'm just like weeping. And but the turkey was so big, and then this is the beauty of how God provides. When He does provide, He provides, in a way that's almost comical.
Yeah,
it was so big I had to break the legs to get it inside the turkey roaster, And,
I was going to say 25-pound turkey's a lot for 2 people.
It was massive. It was massive. Yeah. And we had like little kids. So yeah.
Okay.
So what ended up happening? So like we had a neighbor who had he was on house arrest, had an ankle bracelet. And I don't know what he did, but he was a nice guy, nice enough neighbor. So we fixed up a plate for him and brought it over to him, because he couldn't go anywhere. He couldn't be with his family. And and he shared some venison, with me. And it was just, it was this neat experience, And so whenever we've gone through these hard times, God has come through. Just like now, with all of the stuff that we've gone through, and it has been hard. And I have cried a lot of tears. I've shed a lot of tears. My wife shed a lot of tears. My kids have all broken down at times, from the stress of everything, not knowing whether their dad was going to go to jail, not knowing whether I was going to lose my job, and then we lost my job, and not knowing I was going to find a job. And so this time around, what God did was when, like I said, they put me on administrative leave without pay. When that ran up, I was on my knees just praying. And then my lawyer ended up, giving this story to the Daily Caller. After that, I think because of it, the publicity of it, my company thought better of just getting rid of me. so they actually called me up. They said, look, we don't want the negative PR of firing a whistleblower. So we're going to put you on administrative leave with pay, and we're going to try to get you reinstated. And they worked really hard to try to get me reinstated. I got to hand it to them. They kept me on administrative pay, leave with pay, for 3 months. And they actually, it was every week to week. They had to prove it each week, right? So every week, come Friday, I'm on my knees praying, dear Jesus, please provide. Don't let them fire me. Every week they approved it for another week. And then finally it got to the point where they had finished going through the process of requesting me to be back and reinstated. And the guys that I worked for at the VA, they actually wanted me back to work, and they really, liked the work that I had. I'd had 2 commendations that year for the work that I had done. And so they were very happy with my work. But the, the higher ups, at the higher levels within the VA, they don't know who I am and they could care less. And they didn't want the hassle of it. And so they basically told the prime, yeah, if you want to bring them back, you're going to have to assume all the risk. And so the prime contractor told my company, no, we're not going to bring them back. So I was out. They offered me a severance of like 2 weeks, and I was like, no, I'm not taking it, because then I would never be. If I had taken it, I wouldn't be able to even talk to you about it right now.
Yeah, I've heard a couple things about the VA and the way that they've treated other whistleblowers in the past. I mean, not that you were a whistleblower at the VA, but I mean,
no,
but
which is ironic.
Yeah,
yeah. I mean, I wasn't even. I mean, that's how bad. They've treated whistleblowers that didn't even blow the whistle at their station bad. so that's kind of crazy. But I was out, and I was not able to accept, and I asked my lawyers, and they advised me against, accepting that, especially such a small amount. So
yeah, that's like a slap in the face.
Yeah. But I had bills to pay.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what the hell am I going to do? And a very nice woman made a single donation, of $5,000, which totally made up for the loss of, the amount that I would have gotten through the severance. And so that helped me to be able to kind of carry us through. And then I started a GoFundMe, and this is the amazing part. So there's a balance, right? Of what I need financially, and I asked for a little bit more because I didn't know how much I was going to need, because I didn't know how long I'd be out of work. But it's amazing because the amount that I needed was exactly what came in, not a dime more than what I needed, not a dime less than what I needed. Exactly what I needed came in. And we were able to pay our bills and never fall behind. And in fact, this is the other thing that was really, really interesting through this whole experience. We give, to our church and to a couple of different charities, take care of, poor kids in the world. And I was very, very tempted to cut that off. Be like, you know what? I'm sorry, church. I'm sorry, but we can't donate right now. We can't give because we got our own needs. People to give to us. And
I think that's something that most people will go through, honestly.
Oh yeah. But I was getting ready to do that and to cut it off, but I had this nudge, and this is really important. We have to pay attention to those nudges. When we get that sense that something's wrong, that we're about to make a mistake, we got to listen to it, because that's God speaking to you, I think. And I felt like God was speaking to me, saying, you know what? I want you to give, even though you don't know where your next paycheck's going to come from. And it was very scary, but we did. And like I said, we never saw a time where we ran out of money. We never saw a time where we weren't able to pay our bills. The money came in, and then eventually I was able to get a job again. And I had a good friend who wrote letters to the president of the company that he worked for, and they met with me, and I disclosed everything to him up front about what I was going through. And I was like thinking, oh, there's no way these guys are going to hire me, because it requires a clearance. But they were like, well, your clearance is still good, so we'll hire you. And I had the skills that they were looking for. So I was able to start working again. And so I never missed a beat. And I really do I credit that to God and his provision for us. And so, I have no doubt about the miracles of God. And I have no doubt about how powerful and effective prayer is. But like I said, when you fast on top of that, it's like supercharging your prayers. And then when you take multiple people, thousands of people, and you bring them together to pray focused on particular issues, it is even more powerful. Like the scriptures say, where two or more are gathered in my name is where my spirit is. And then there is power in that, in numbers. And so the goal, of this whole I guess, movement is to try to impact, these different issues, and get God on our side, helping us.
Yeah.
It requires, repentance. It requires us acknowledging our sin and acknowledging the things that we've, where we failed, turning from our wicked ways and calling on God's name to, and calling on him to change it and to, come back and bless our country. And I think we're already headed down that right path, and I think that people are starting to wake up, and people are starting to have this sense that there is something bigger than them, that they need to participate in. And so, it's my goal that everybody will have that same faith that I have, which comes through experience. I've had so many experiences like the one that I already mentioned to you about Thanksgiving.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so many experiences like that. That's just one of many that I have no doubt in my mind that God exists.
Oh yeah.
Some could, aliens could come down in UFOs and prove to me how they genetically created mankind and the Bible was just Aesop's fables. It would not have 1 ounce of effect on my faith in God, because my faith in God transcends even my own understanding and reason because of the experience that I have, which can't be denied. So either God is real or I'm a lunatic, one of the two. So, and I'm pretty sure that I have a sound mind.
I would say that you do as well. I would say that all things are through God, so even if aliens did come down and say that,
Right.
I'd be like, well,
Right.
God created you so that you could create us.
Right.
That's the only answer.
I would just start preaching to them.
There you go. You'd have them. I think you'd have them. Oh, Nate. Yeah. All right. Well, we've been talking for just over an hour now. Is there anything else that you want people to know about you? Or, I mean, I'm going to have the website up. I'll have shown it throughout the show here as well. Give people a little demonstration as you're talking about it.
A couple things. So one thing, I'll just clear up a couple of things since I have an opportunity here with a fairly large audience. Many people asked me, or many people, I was supposed to be on Sean Hannity's show.
Mm-hmm.
People were like, what happened? How come you didn't go back on? And when are you going to go back on? And, and people were rightfully frustrated. They thought they were going to, be able to hear my words of what happened, and then it got canceled. So I want to tell you guys what happened. So they legitimately, it got canceled because of the funeral, George Bush funeral, which nobody could have planned for. That just wasn't known, and it went much longer than expected. And they canceled my show, and they canceled several others who were supposed to be on that night. Sean Hannity had nothing to do with that decision. That was made at an executive level, and his producer called me, on Monday to ask me to come back on. The problem is that things had changed between Friday and Monday. Friday, I didn't know if I was even going to have a job. Monday, I was being told that I was going to be put on administrative leave with pay. And so I had to be concerned about, the company's reputation and that I worked for and things like that. And after talking with, legal counsel and conferring with them, it just didn't make sense to go on. That's the danger of doing a live interview, is that you don't have that opportunity to edit things, and Sean Hannity only does things live. So that was really, what occurred. My circumstances changed, and it wasn't in my best interest to go on. Eventually, there will come a time, when I can talk about things, and but that'll be after, the case is closed and and the air is cleared, and
can we just be clear about that real quick, just so the audience understands?
Yep.
It's not closing out the investigation that began with your whistleblowing activity. It is the investigation into you as a result of that. Was that okay to say?
Yeah. So, I mean, there is an investigation into me that's ongoing right now, because they have to do their due diligence and, make sure that I didn't, take secrets and give them to, bad people and things like that. So that's not completed. There's also there will probably always be limitations as to what I can talk about as
Of
to
course.
it over, because and people, I want people to understand, it's not like, I know a lot of people love WikiLeaks and they love, when people leak stuff and all that. But you got to understand that when you're dealing with issues that have to do with law enforcement, information that gets leaked could potentially jeopardize an actual case. A lot of us would like to see justice in some of these, issues. I would hate to think that I was responsible for a case getting, or evidence getting thrown out because I leaked it. So
Of course.
want to do that. And that's one of the issues. The other issue is, there is stuff that's classified, and it is illegal, for me to talk about if
Yeah.
it's not been redacted. And so, and those decisions aren't made by me; they're made by others. And while other people, feel the need to go ahead and publish classified information, like Manning and Snowden, look at what the result of that was. Not just to them, their lives, in the case of Manning being thrown in prison, and in the case of Snowden having to leave the country and probably never going to be able to come back.
Yeah.
But I certainly did not want that, and
No.
don't want that, and that's not worth it to me, to do something like that. But the other reason, and this is important, and we all need to understand this, and we all need to be thinking about this. And so it's important that when we see whistleblowers come forward, that we don't encourage them to break the law, because when bad things happen to people trying to do the right thing, it discourages other people coming forward, right?
Right.
The thing is that there were other things that occurred as a result of Manning's leak and Snowden's leak. One of those things were, I believe it was the British. They had to pull back every single one of their agents that were out there, because their potential exposure,
Yeah.
because of the cables that were going back and forth that got leaked. And so, that's not a good thing, because if they were, actually, it could have put their lives in jeopardy. And it certainly, they lost their tactical advantage at knowing what, terrorist cells and things like that, may have been planning and things like that. So I would never want to be responsible for anything like that.
Of course.
And so that's why I will not talk about or get into any detail about the information. The fact is that the people who have the ability to do something about it and who needed to see it, namely the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence and the Senate Select Committee, the Inspector General for the Department of Justice, and the Attorney General, Sessions, when he was in, they all had an opportunity to see the information, that I brought forward. And so, it was in their hands. And as we know from a recent FOIA that came out by Judicial Watch, I think it was Judicial Watch that was able to receive this FOIA.
I'm sure it was.
Jeff Sessions did put forward, a letter that went to John Huber, asking him to look into Uranium One and the Clinton Foundation. So, we'll see what comes of that. And then one other thing I want to say in regards to this, and this will be the last that I talk about in regards to that subject matter. Regardless of how we feel, okay, personally about Hillary Clinton or any other person, Andrew McCabe or Comey or all these people that a lot of us might consider deep state. We live in a country that has the rule of law, and there's supposed to be justice, and you're supposed to be innocent until proven guilty. And each of these people, whether we like them or not, they deserve their day in court, and they should not be thrown in jail without a proper investigation and trial, and judgment by their peers. And that is what makes our country and our system of justice so great, is that we are all afforded a right to defend ourselves. And we need to remember that, because we don't want the shoe to ever be on the other foot where we're being accused of something and we don't have a chance to defend ourselves.
Yeah.
And so that's something that's important to remember. And I've heard you say this before, and I want to reiterate it. The wheels of justice, when they are actually being, working and operating the way they're supposed to, are slow, and they're slow intentionally, because you want to make sure that you have all the evidence, that you have it well documented, that you have thoroughly investigated before, you bring charges, right? Because you want it to stick. You don't want to waste, waste all of those resources for nothing.
2 years and $35 million.
Right? Exactly. Okay. Exactly. And so the wheels of justice are slow.
Yep.
I still have faith in the Justice Department, especially with Barr running it. He seems to me, and I don't know him personally, and I don't know anything about him more than what you guys know, but he seems to me to be a man of integrity, and a man who, when I watched his hearing, for his confirmation hearing, I was very interested in what he had to say when he was asked about why he would want to do this. And he brought up the point that he feels that he could be objective and he can do the right thing because he has no political aspirations, beyond this. He is already retired. He came out of retirement to do this. And I think he loves the Justice Department. He dedicated a large portion of his life to it. And so I think he sees an opportunity to try to fix some of these problems and hopefully save, the Department of Justice. But it's going to require somebody that has some grit and quite frankly, has some balls to do the things that, are necessary. And but it also, they have to be a bit of they have to be a very cautious person too, and really weigh things out, because, there is this balance, right, between seeing justice, but I don't think we want to see our institutions completely destroyed.
Yeah.
So they've got to handle things with discretion, and the American people want to know what's going on. So that's hard to have discretion when the American people want to know what's going on.
Right.
But they have to. And so that's just something that I wanted to just put out there, because I know I've really never said anything about any of this. And this is really the first time I've talked about it. And it'll probably be the last time, at least for a while, that I talk about it. But there are a lot of good people, who work in these agencies, a lot of good FBI agents, some of them that I know, a lot of good CIA agents, a lot of good NSA. I worked for a short period of time with Mar4 Cyber and was detached to NSA. And I know some of the people over there, and they're good people, and they're a really, good organization. So I don't want to see these institutions damaged. I want to see them restored. I want to see them held accountable. I want there to be transparency, and I want these problems with things like FISA and two-tiered system of justice and things like that fixed. But I don't want to see these institutions destroyed.
No, I completely agree with you, and I've made that point multiple times on the show, and I'd like to think that my viewers understand the important distinction between necessary whistleblowing to bring about those changes that we're trying to see affected, and then just dumping, classified material on the internet. I think that there were some good things that came out of collateral murder, that whole the unnecessary killing of those AP reporters. That's important. The stuff that came out of Snowden, I think that was targeted specifically, to weaken the NSA. Even if
and I mean, and there are legitimate things, right? Yeah. Like let's face it, programs of the government spying on American citizens, not good, right? I think everybody agrees on that. It's unconstitutional, and so there is a place for whistleblowing, and I would say for selectively, there is a place for at risk to yourself. You have to admit, you have to acknowledge that if you're going to blow the whistle, it doesn't matter if you do everything by the book or if you go to the press. You are taking a risk, period.
Yep.
And I knew that when I made the decision. I prayed about it. I didn't just, jump into it. I knew that I was potentially ruining my career, and potentially, putting myself in danger, especially in regards to the gravity of who I was blowing the whistle on.
Mm-hmm.
And but I made the decision that it was the right thing to do, and I was not going to be one who was going to be able to sleep at night knowing that I didn't do anything. And so I prayed about it, and one of the things was, as I asked God for a sign, I said, Lord, if you want me to do this, I need you to find me a job somewhere else. And 2 days later, I got a call, and I hadn't even posted my resume. I wasn't even looking.
Wow.
I got a phone call from somebody who saw my stuff on LinkedIn, and they offered me a job that was like really too good to turn down. Working from home 100% of the time.
Yeah.
For a comparable salary, it was still less than what I was making, but because I didn't have to commute, it worked out.
Right.
And so that was it. When that happened, I was like, okay, all right, I can't believe I'm doing this, but I'm going to do it. And so the rest is history. But there there are things that have come out that were important. The American people needed to know about the like you said, the AP reporters were killed. The I think the spying program and it's this massive capture of data and stuff like that. And I think that it's only fair that something like that deserves it to be debated. In the American public before we accept that, because we are not a dictatorship. We are a country that is a republic, and the people have a right, to have a say in their government and what their government does. So from that perspective, there are certain selective things, that I think, could have come out in a different way. And maybe, and I don't want to judge anybody, because to be honest with you, when you decide to blow the whistle, it's a very scary thing.
Oh, yeah.
Even though they say they have all this stuff and they say they have all this training on it and they tell you how to do it and who to talk to, it's really poorly, put out there. And
well, it seems like it's more like publicly like, yes, you can do this, but then like behind the scenes they're like, you better never.
Right.
We're going to get you.
and that's the sense I think that a lot of people have.
Yeah.
And it certainly has been the experience that I've had. So, but at the same time, we have to be careful,
yeah.
About how we disclose things and how we go about, blowing the whistle. And it is a delicate balance. We don't hurt our country. At the same time, we want to protect our country.
Definitely, and I think that by and large, the days of WikiLeaks are over. That organization is not going to exist in the same manner in which it did before. And there were some other things that came out through, the release of the Podesta emails. Those things could never have come out through a whistleblowing activity because
so
there is
of course they weren't classified either.
That's why I'm saying, because they weren't.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily have a problem with something like that.
Yeah.
My issue is when classified information that could do grave damage or harm.
Oh yes.
Gets leaked. I'll give you an example. And I can actually speak to this because I'm a cybersecurity expert who has worked. So when I was working for Marforce Cyber, I was part of a cyber protection team that was part of the national mission. Our job was to track down hackers that had infiltrated, government systems and eradicate them. Okay, I was part of what's called the DCI hunt team, and a lot of money and resources goes into developing tools that other nation states don't have.
Right.
I was very disappointed when I saw the Vault 7, disclosure or leak, to WikiLeaks, because it exposed a lot of specialized tools that have been developed and, hacking tools and things like that. And as a cybersecurity expert, it's no different. You got to realize there is a just like we have warfare, naval warfare, we have airspace warfare. There is a uh,
Digital.
there is a digital war going on, and there is a cyber war, and there's a cyber war space that we um, you know want a tactical advantage over other countries and over our enemies. And everybody knows about the Chinese stealing plans for our latest jet. And
Yes.
and that those when those types of things happen, it really sets us back, right? Because we spend billions and billions of dollars doing research and developing these tools to give us a tactical advantage. And when we lose it, then we've lost our tactical advantage, right?
Oh yeah.
And tactical advantage is the difference between us having to go to war to defend our country and having an advantage so high that nobody wants to mess with us,
Right.
right?
That it's an effective deterrent.
Exactly.
And
So the problem with the hacking thing is that when people leak these tools, we've lost, years of development. And now we're back to square one, and we have to those tools are burned. Once they're burned, we can't use them again. So we got to develop new ones.
yeah.
And it's not an easy thing. It's a very expensive and costly thing. And so I don't really have a lot of sympathy for people who leak that kind of information and end up going to jail for it.
Yeah.
Um, that's just how I feel about it.
What really bummed me out was the lengths that the Obama administration went to jail legitimate whistleblowers like yourself.
True.
There were
True.
several instances of people that came forward with things and did it in the correct way, and they were absolutely nailed to the wall. So that's just more further deterrent. And then also to touch on the Chinese, Chinese infiltration and stealing of our technology across the board is a huge problem. There was just several research universities throughout the United States just had to let go several like research fellows and scientists that were working there because the Chinese were paying them to get the health research information that we had been working on.
Yep. I mean, okay, so that's an interesting point you bring up. On that note, that was one of my biggest concerns over the whole, Trump-Russia collusion thing, right? Um, Everybody knows the story, of the boy who cried wolf.
Yeah.
And my concern is that there was so much media attention on Russia as a threat, and certainly Russia as a threat, no doubt. Everybody knows that.
Mm-hmm.
But we have other threats,
Oh, yeah.
like China, and they're a far bigger threat, in my opinion, in terms of their ability to influence elections and things like that. I mean, just look at all of the like Confucius centers that are at all the universities, and like you just said, all of these university fellows, that are all these universities and stuff, and there's certainly we don't know the full extent of the of the propaganda impact that they have in our universities and causing disruption in elections and stuff like that.
Well, in business and media too, I mean,
Yeah,
they have
absolutely.
tremendous spending power, So,
Yeah,
I live in a college town, and it has a high, Chinese student population. And not to say, I'm not xenophobic. I'm not saying that anybody who's Chinese coming over here, but they come over here with tremendous resources, and they're spending a lot of time. And this is the type of thing that I see. I mean, I see our technology getting siphoned out of the country and going over there, and they have no problem with like patent fraud, and just
right.
cloning things.
Right. And then there's also organized crime, is a problem in terms of cyber. You've got the Iranians, you've got the Syrian electronic army. There's whole bunches of various nation states, and even some of our allies.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Some of our allies. There's been cases in where some of our own allies have stolen technology from us, and so we can't afford to let our guard down, and be hyper focused on one particular country or nation state. We have to, really be focused, truthfully, we're on all of them. And so my concern is that the media and all of their attention and all of the, when Congress, calls for all of these, meetings, and it's political for them.
Mm-hmm.
And let's say that it's just for the sake of argument, let's say that they're calling on hearings and they're pulling people away from, their jobs to have hearings, and they're making speeches about, oh, we're going to go after the Russians, or we're going to go do this, or we're going to, all of that stuff distracts away from what's, all the other stuff that's going. It takes resources away. It takes resources away from the guys, the boots on the ground guys who are actually, trying to do stuff, because you end up having political pressure coming down through the chain of command to put more attention on Russia versus putting attention on other countries and nation states and things like that. So to me, Congress needs to be more responsible in that regard. I don't expect them to, but they need to be. They should. It's more of an issue of I wish they were.
Of course.
And but
I think it comes back down to America being for sale. I can't imagine any government in its right mind anywhere in the world allowing themselves to get into the type of trade deficits that we were in, into the disadvantages across the world. America has just been throwing money to everywhere except, our infrastructure and our own people. We have a tremendous welfare system here, but people are incentivized to stay on that and not better themselves or do anything else.
Yeah, well, you bring up a good point, and that's another issue. I think that something else we need to add to our prayers and to this prayer and fasting thing is the deficit.
Yeah.
We definitely need to be praying about it, because if our economy stops growing, we are going to be in some serious trouble.
Well, I think some numbers from the Fed just came out, and the rate hikes that did happen from the Fed, it just slowed the growth in the United States to a crawl. And I would have to say, probably one of the biggest problems is the Fed. To me, it's always been idiotic to imagine paying someone else to print our money for us. And, for every dollar that we get, we owe, $1.05 or $1.20. Well, if we've only got $1 coming into the system, where is that interest that we have to pay to the Fed, the Federal Reserve, to where is that money coming from? So we are perpetually going to be in debt. And as long as our elected representatives spend like there is no tomorrow, there isn't going to be, because at a certain point, the bubble's going to pop. And the the American dollar is going to be worth nothing. We're already losing the oil standard. Very soon people are going to stop trading in American dollars, and that's going to be a really big problem for the United States.
Well, that could be the disaster that might be coming.
Yeah.
That I was mentioning, about after a revival, it seems that there's a period of time, of grace, and then you have this massive, war or disaster or something that occurs, and who knows, maybe that's what's coming. I hope not. I'm certainly praying that that's not the case, but
yeah, if Trump was to take us back onto the gold standard, I think that we would probably have some type of immediate financial, disaster. But in the long term, it's really going to be the best thing for us. We're going to have to do a reset, because there's going to be some growing pains, but we cannot continue to survive. Well, we won't survive, but we can't continue to live on the same system that we're on right now.
Yeah, well, we definitely can't. And I wish I knew more about it, had more expertise in that area of economics, but I'll be the first to admit the one class I failed in college. So don't take advice from me on economics.
Not a problem.
But cybersecurity, that I'm an expert in. I can certainly speak to that.
That's funny. I've got another close friend that is I believe you guys had the same position. He's employed in another area of the federal government, but he's been a guest on the show before. I would love to have you both on and do kind of like a round table if you would ever be open to that. Okay.
Yeah, that would be great.
I think he would be totally into it, because he's a great guy. We call him White Hat.
All right. Cool.
Awesome. Well, Nate, we're going on an hour and 40 minutes, man. Anything else that you want us to know, or anything else you want to say?
No, I think that's good for tonight. If I say anything more, I might get myself in trouble.
It's no problem. I don't think we're going to have to cut much out. I mean, I think you did a good job, but don't worry. I do appreciate you coming on, Nate. And again, everybody, if you want to get a hold of Nate from a couple different ways, if you want to check out the Bend a Knee Project, everything will be in the pinned comment below. Of course, check the description because you got a description of the show in there. Any of my information is going to be in the description. If you want to reach out to Nate, again, he is on Twitter. That seems to be a very popular means to do it. But I think everybody should really take a look at the Bend a Knee Project. It's got everything that we need as far as I'm concerned. All we need to do is ask God, and He's going to provide for us. And prayer is very, very powerful. So I just want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. Nate, thank you so much for coming on the show. I look forward to having you on again in the future, buddy. I wish you the best of luck because I'll be praying for you myself. I guarantee it. So, again, thank you, everyone. As always, this has been Red Pill 78. I am the Corruption Detector, and this was your Red Pill News. Good luck, everyone, and God bless.
Yeah.